Snow does not simply fall over the Western clans. It arrives like a verdict, silent and absolute. And on the night this story begins, it was falling over a throne room that had not been this quiet in 100 years. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Now, let us return to the Iron Moon Throne, where a young woman named Liana stood alone beneath ancient stone pillars, waiting for a king to end everything they had once been to each other. She had walked into that hall on legs that refused to shake, though everything inside her begged her to run. Her cloak still carried the cold of the morning patrol, small crystals of frost clinging to silver-gray wool, and if anyone had looked closely enough, they might have noticed how tightly her fingers curled at her sides, as though she were holding herself together by sheer will alone. But no one looked closely. No one in that hall wanted to see her as a person that night. They wanted a ceremony. They wanted an ending they could explain away as necessity. At the far end of the chamber, upon a throne carved from black stone and cold iron, sat the man she had once called hers. King Kaelen. Broad-shouldered, composed, unreadable to everyone except, perhaps, to her, and even she was beginning to wonder if she had ever truly known what lived behind that calm. He rose slowly when she entered, and the movement alone was enough to silence the last murmurs among the gathered packs. Beside him stood Lady Seraphine, daughter of the Eastern Alpha, dressed in white silk stitched with silver thread, her smile polished and practiced, never quite reaching her eyes. Behind her, the council watched with the quiet, eager patience of men who had been waiting for this outcome for months. This was not simply a ceremony. It was the price of peace, or so they called it. Years of border raids had bled the kingdom thin. Harvests had failed 2 seasons running. Smaller packs murmured of rebellion in the dark corners of taverns and training yards. And the council, in their wisdom or their fear, had decided that only a marriage between kingdoms could hold the West together. Liana was the obstacle standing in the way of that peace. An orphan raised inside castle walls by strangers who never quite loved her as their own. A healer with gentle hands. A scout who knew every ridge and hollow of the northern forests. A woman with no bloodline, no army, no dowry to offer. Nothing but a bond that fate itself had once chosen for her, and that the council now insisted fate must be made to unchoose. Liana, Kaelen said, and his voice filled the chamber the way thunder fills an open sky. She answered him with 2 words only. My king. Not my mate. Not anymore. And the absence of that word cut deeper than any blade could have. The moon has chosen many paths, Kaelen began, each word measured, careful, rehearsed. But today, I must choose the one that protects this kingdom. A murmur rippled through the hall, like wind through dry grass. Liana had known this moment was coming. She had heard the whispers in the corridors for weeks, had watched the way servants stopped speaking when she entered a room, had noticed how Lord Cedric's eyes lingered on her with something close to pity. Still, knowing a blade is coming never dulls its edge. It only gives you time to imagine exactly where it will cut. The High Elder stepped forward, unrolling a scroll so old its edges had gone the color of dust. Before witnesses of every allied pack, he proclaimed, "The Alpha King will sever the sacred bond." Every sound in the room seemed to disappear at once. Even the braziers along the walls seemed to still their flames, as though the fire itself did not want to witness what was about to happen. Kaelen descended the stone steps of his throne one at a time, until only a few feet of cold marble separated him from the woman who still, despite everything, refused to look away from him. "I never wished for this," he said, so quietly that only she could hear it. Liana searched his face for something, regret, hesitation, some flicker of the man who had once promised her a kingdom built together instead of one built on obligation. She found only duty. And beneath the duty, something else. Fear. Not fear of her. Fear of every eye in that hall. Fear of disappointing the people who had placed a crown on his head and expected him to carry its weight without complaint. A strange calm settled over her then, the kind of calm that comes only when a person has already grieved something in advance. "So this is your choice," she whispered. His jaw tightened. "It is." She gave the smallest nod, the kind that costs a person everything to make. "Then make it." Something flashed across his eyes. Pain, unmistakable, raw, and then it vanished beneath the crown, buried the way kings bury everything that might make them look human in front of their court. "I, Kaelen of House Blackthorn, Alpha King of the Western clans," he said, his voice rising to fill every corner of the hall, "release our fated bond." What followed was not loud. It was not violent. It was worse than either. It felt like a warm light leaving the world slowly, deliberately, taking something essential with it as it went. Liana staggered. Her heartbeat faltered in her chest. Somewhere deep inside her mind, her wolf let out a sound unlike anything she had heard before. Not anger, but grief, pure and terrible. For one instant, she thought she might fall. But she refused to give the council the satisfaction of watching her break in front of them. She planted both feet against the cold stone floor, straightened her shoulders, and met Kaelen's eyes one final time. "You've made your decision," she said. "I pray history remembers it kindly." She turned without waiting for his permission, without waiting for anyone's comfort, and walked toward the massive doors at the end of the hall. The crowd parted in stunned silence. No one stopped her. No one spoke a single word of kindness as she passed. As she crossed the threshold, an icy gust swept into the chamber behind her, extinguishing several torches along the walls at once, and among the older wolves present, sudden darkness during a sacred ceremony was considered something far more troubling than bad luck. It was considered a warning from the moon itself. Outside, snow drifted silently across the courtyard, indifferent to everything that had just been decided inside those walls. Liana wrapped her cloak tighter around her shoulders and walked toward the old healer's tower where she had spent her childhood, the only place in that castle that had ever felt like it belonged to her. Only after the heavy wooden door closed behind her did the strength finally leave her legs. She sank to the floor, her breathing uneven, and for a long moment she believed the tears building behind her eyes were simply grief for the bond she had lost. But that was not the whole truth. She had been hiding something else for days now, a truth she had barely allowed herself to believe. She rested a hand gently against her stomach. Earlier that same morning, before the sun had even risen over the castle walls, the healer had quietly confirmed what her heart had already suspected. She was carrying new life. No one else knew. Not the council. Not the servants who whispered about her in the halls. Not even the king, who had just severed their bond in front of an entire kingdom. Tears threatened to fall. She blinked them back. "If fate has taken one future from me," she whispered into the empty tower room, "then I will protect the future still growing within me." Outside her window, thunder rolled across the sky with not a single cloud in sight, a sign that, in that part of the world, meant something was listening. Far beyond the castle walls, hidden among ancient pines, a hooded figure watched the fortress from a ridge above, silver eyes narrowing beneath a heavy hood. An old woman closed her eyes and murmured words that would have chilled Liana to the bone had she heard them. "The child has awakened. They have begun exactly as the prophecy foretold." And far below that ridge, deep within the darkness of the forest, a pair of golden eyes opened slowly, watching, waiting. Someone else had heard the same prophecy. And unlike the old woman on the ridge, this one had no intention of allowing that child to ever draw a breath. The castle bells rang 3 times that night, their heavy echoes rolling across the snow-covered mountains like a final farewell to everything Liana had once known. She did not look back as she passed through the narrow postern gate the following morning. The gate closed behind her with a dull groan, sealing away the only home she had ever had. Before her stretched nothing but an endless wilderness of white. Ancient pines bent under thick blankets of snow. Frozen rivers hid beneath sheets of ice. Mountains vanished into storm clouds swallowing the pale winter sun. The cold struck her instantly, clawing through her cloak and biting at every inch of exposed skin, until each breath felt like fire in her lungs. She had packed only what she needed to survive: dried meat, hard bread, a water skin, flint, a hunting knife, 2 blankets, a change of clothes, and a small pouch holding every silver coin she had saved over years of quiet, careful living. Enough to survive, if fortune showed her any mercy at all. If, she whispered bitterly into the wind. Her wolf remained silent. Normally, even in danger, the presence of her inner wolf filled her mind with instinct and quiet courage. Now there was only emptiness where that presence used to live. The severed bond had left an aching hollow inside her, and every step she took reminded her that she now walked entirely alone. Except she did not. Not truly. Another heartbeat rested beneath her own, and she placed a hand over her stomach as she walked. "I won't fail you," she said, and the wind carried the words away into the storm. Hours passed. The snowfall thickened until the entire world became little more than shifting shades of white and gray. Branches groaned overhead in the wind. Somewhere far off, a lone wolf howled. Another answered. Then another. Liana froze in place. These were not the sounds of ordinary wolves calling to one another across the wilderness. These were sounds with purpose behind them. Communication. Coordination. "Trackers," she whispered, and immediately stepped off the main trail into the deeper woods, where massive pine trunks blocked the worst of the wind, but also hid whatever might be moving between them. Every snapped twig sounded like an approaching footstep. Every shadow seemed to hold its breath alongside her. She forced herself to remain calm because panic burned energy, and energy meant warmth, and warmth meant the difference between surviving the night and not. As dusk settled over the forest, she found a narrow stream buried beneath a layer of thin ice. She knelt and cracked the surface with a fallen branch, refilling her water skin with fingers that stung from the cold. And then suddenly she heard it, a crunch. Not her own footstep. She spun around. Nothing but trees and drifting snow. Perhaps she had imagined it. Another crunch. Closer this time. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. "Who's there?" she called out, though every instinct told her not to. Silence answered her. And then, a black raven landed on a branch nearby, its bright silver eyes fixed directly on hers in a way that felt entirely unnatural for a bird. It tilted its head once, twice, and then flew deeper into the trees. Liana frowned. Most ravens fled at the scent of wolves. This one seemed to be waiting for her. She ignored it and kept walking, only to realize within minutes that she had somehow returned to the exact same frozen stream. The raven was there again, watching, waiting. "It's leading me," she whispered.
"But why?"
Night fell quickly after that, and the temperature dropped with it. Snow began falling harder, swallowing the path behind her entirely. She searched desperately for shelter and found a rocky outcrop with a narrow opening hidden beneath it, barely large enough for one person to crawl inside. She blocked part of the entrance with fallen branches and, after several frustrating attempts, finally coaxed a spark from her flint into a small fire fed by dry moss. It was not much warmth, but it was enough. She ate slowly, forcing down bread and dried venison despite the tight knot in her stomach, because the child needed strength, not grief. As the fire crackled, exhaustion pulled at her, and for the first time since leaving the castle, Tears finally escaped. "They chose power," she whispered into the flames. "But I choose you." A small kick answered her, gentle and unmistakable. Her breath caught in her throat, and she smiled through the tears. "You heard me," she said softly. Then, outside the cave, the wind stopped entirely. Complete silence fell over the forest, the kind of silence so total that even the insects seemed to have vanished. Her wolf stirred inside her for the first time since the rejection, not with fear this time, but with warning. Something was approaching. Slowly, deliberately. Heavy footsteps circled the cave, one set, then another, snow crunching beneath what could only be enormous paws. Liana extinguished her small fire with a handful of dirt, plunging the cave into darkness, and gripped her hunting knife tightly, holding her breath as the footsteps stopped directly outside. A deep growl rumbled through the night. Not one wolf, several. And then a voice. Low, ancient, utterly calm. "You may come out now." She said nothing. "I know you're awake," the stranger continued, unhurried. "If I wished you harm, you would already be dead." Every instinct screamed at her not to answer. But the silence stretched on so long that eventually she spoke anyway. "Who are you?" A long pause followed before the stranger answered. "I've been waiting 20 years for the daughter of Alara Moonshadow." Liana's blood ran cold. No one had spoken her mother's name since the day she died, not even the castle elders who had raised her. "That's impossible," she whispered. "I never told anyone who I was." A quiet laugh answered her. "You didn't," the voice said. "But the child you're carrying did." Liana's eyes widened. Every story she had ever heard claimed that unborn wolves possessed no magic of their own. So how could a stranger, hiding in the darkness of a snowbound forest, possibly know? Outside the cave, a pale silver light began glowing faintly through the falling snow. Not moonlight. Something older than that. Something alive. The figure finally stepped forward, and an elderly woman emerged from the shadows, wrapped in a cloak woven from white wolf fur, her long silver hair catching that strange light, her piercing blue eyes holding what looked like the memory of countless winters. She regarded Liana with neither pity nor fear. Only certainty. "The prophecy has begun," she said softly. "And before this winter ends, every alpha on the continent will either hunt your child or die protecting him." Liana tightened her grip on the knife, forcing steadiness into her trembling voice. "I don't know who you are," she said, "but if you've come for my child, I promise you this blade will find your heart before yours finds mine." The old woman only smiled, not mockingly, but with something like pride. "There she is," she murmured. "Your mother carried that same fire." "My mother died when I was a child," Liana said. "So you were told." The words struck harder than the cold ever had. "My name is Maeve," the woman continued. "Long before Kaelen wore the moon crown, I served as keeper of the Moon Temple." Liana searched her memory for the name. The Moon Temple. She had heard whispers of it as a little girl, an ancient sanctuary said to have vanished after the Great Blood Wars, dismissed by most as nothing more than a story told to young wolves at bedtime. "You expect me to believe fairy tales?" Liana asked. "No," Maeve answered. "I expect you to believe your own eyes." She raised her hand, and silver light flowed across her fingertips like liquid moonlight. The falling snow around the cave began to move, not with the wind, but with purpose, gathering into a shape. A young woman formed from shimmering frost, long black hair, kind eyes, a smile that felt achingly familiar. Liana's knees nearly gave out beneath her. "Mother," she whispered. The frost figure smiled gently before dissolving back into drifting snow, and tears blurred Liana's vision as she turned to Maeve. "How did you do that?" "I didn't," Maeve said. "The forest remembers every soul who ever walked beneath its trees." For the first time since leaving the castle, hope pushed its way through Liana's grief. "My mother," she began. "She was far more than the castle ever allowed you to believe," Maeve said softly. That night, the fire burned again inside the small cave, and steam rose from a pot of pine needle tea Maeve prepared from herbs kept in her weathered satchel. The scent reminded Liana of childhood, of safer days she had almost forgotten. "You said every alpha will hunt my child," Liana said finally. "Some will," Maeve replied. "And others? They will give their lives protecting him." Liana frowned. "Why?" Maeve stared into the flames for a long moment before answering. "Because your son was never meant to inherit only one kingdom. The old kingdoms were built on blood. But according to the oldest prophecy, one child born beneath a broken mate bond would unite wolves who had spent centuries killing one another." Liana laughed bitterly. "My child hasn't even been born." "Exactly," Maeve said. "And already, powerful people fear him." Meanwhile, far away inside Dunholm Castle, Kaelen stood alone on the highest balcony, staring out over snow-covered stone walls. The celebration marking his political engagement had ended hours earlier, the music long since faded into silence. His wolf paced restlessly inside his mind, agitated in a way it had never been before. "You made the right choice," a voice said behind him. Lord Cedric, the kingdom's chief advisor, stepped onto the balcony. "The Eastern Alliance secures our borders." Kaelen said nothing. "The people will understand," Cedric continued. "No," Kaelen finally said. "They'll obey." A long silence stretched between them before Cedric spoke again. "You still think about her?" Kaelen's jaw tightened. "Thinking changes nothing." "No," Cedric agreed. "But regret destroys kings." Long after the advisor had gone, Kaelen remained on that balcony, hands resting against the frozen stone railing. And then, without warning, sharp pain shot through his chest. A strange image flashed before his eyes. Liana, standing inside a dark cave, one hand resting protectively over her stomach. Then the vision vanished as quickly as it had come. "What was that?" he whispered. His wolf did not answer. Back in the forest, Maeve led Liana deeper into the ancient pines, and by sunrise they reached a place unlike anything Liana had ever seen. Towering trees formed a perfect circle around a crystal-clear lake reflecting the pale winter sky. No snow touched the grass here. Wildflowers bloomed despite the freezing air, and birdsong echoed through the clearing as though the place existed entirely outside of time. "What is this place?" Liana asked. "The Sanctuary of First Moon," Maeve answered. "It still exists. It exists only for those meant to find it." As they approached the lake's edge, ripples spread across the surface, not from wind, but from something rising beneath. A massive white wolf emerged silently from the water, for glowing like fresh snow beneath moonlight, eyes holding an ancient wisdom that made Liana instinctively step back. The wolf simply bowed its enormous head. "The Guardian recognizes royal blood," Maeve said, placing a hand over her heart. "It isn't greeting me," Liana said. "No," Maeve whispered. "It is greeting the child." The great wolf approached slowly and lowered its nose toward Liana's stomach. The unborn child kicked, once, twice, and the Guardian released a deep, peaceful howl that echoed across the entire valley. Within moments, howls answered from every distant mountain, north, south, east, and west. Maeve's face lost all color. "They heard," she said. "Who?" Liana asked. "The Alpha Kings. But they're days away." Maeve shook her head slowly. "They don't need to know where the child is. They only need to know that the first heir has awakened." High above the sanctuary, hidden among the cliffs, a cloaked rider watched the glowing valley through a polished lens, smiling coldly before turning his horse toward Dunholm Castle. By nightfall, the Alpha King would receive news that could change the fate of every kingdom on the continent. That rider crossed 3 frozen rivers before the sun reached its highest point, his black horse making almost no sound against the snow. His cloak carried no crest, no family colors, no mark of allegiance, because men like him survived precisely because no one knew who they truly served. Hidden in his satchel was a single crystal no larger than a robin's egg, silver mist swirling within it. Proof. Kings would wage wars for far less, and he knew it. Back at the sanctuary, Maeve guided Liana into a stone chamber hidden beneath the temple, where moonlight poured through an opening in the ceiling, illuminating dozens of ancient carvings. Each one showed the same image, a child standing between kneeling wolves, some wearing crowns, others carrying broken swords. At the center of every carving was the same symbol, a crescent moon wrapped around a single flame. "What does it mean?" Liana asked. "It represents balance," Maeve said, tracing the moon with her fingers. Between strength, she touched the flame, and mercy. The greatest rulers possess both. "There are hundreds of these carvings," Liana said. "They were made over 1,000 years ago. Then the prophecy is older than every kingdom that exists today." Maeve only nodded. Meanwhile, Dunholm Castle prepared for another gathering, its great hall overflowing with nobles from neighboring territories, wine flowing freely, musicians playing songs of triumph that Kaelen did not hear. His attention remained fixed on the throne room doors, his wolf refusing to settle, the feeling growing stronger with every passing hour, as though something invisible kept calling his name from somewhere far beyond the walls. "Your Majesty," a guard said, approaching. "A messenger insists he carries urgent news." "No scheduled envoy should arrive before next week," Cedric said, frowning. "Bring him," Kaelen said. The hooded rider entered moments later and dropped to one knee. "I bring news from the northern wilderness," he said, and when Kaelen ordered him to speak, he raised the crystal from his satchel, silver light swirling within it. Gasps spread through the hall. Several elderly nobles stepped back, and one whispered in horror, "A moon witness." "I saw the guardian of the first moon," the rider said. It bowed. Every elder in the room stiffened. "To whom?" Cedric demanded. "A young woman," the rider answered. Dark hair, gray eyes, a silver traveling cloak. Every heartbeat in that hall seemed to stop at once. "She was with child," the rider finished. Kaelen froze. The crystal slipped from the rider's fingers and rolled across the marble floor, and no one moved, no one dared breathe, until Kaelen finally whispered a single name. Liana. That night, the council assembled behind closed doors as heavy rain replaced the snow outside, pounding against stained glass windows. "If the report is accurate," Cedric said, "then the prophecy may have awakened." General Veros crossed his arms. "Then we eliminate the threat before rumors spread." Several counselors nodded in agreement. "A threat?" Kaelen said sharply. "Your Majesty," Cedric said, meeting his gaze evenly, "prophecies inspire rebellion." "It is only one unborn child," Kaelen said. "Perhaps," Cedric replied. "Or perhaps it is the beginning of another age." The room fell into heated debate, some demanding immediate action, others urging caution. Kaelen said nothing further, but one thought refused to leave him. She was pregnant. His memory replayed every conversation with Liana from the weeks before the rejection, her unusual exhaustion, her loss of appetite, the mornings she quietly disappeared before breakfast. How had he not seen it? "If that child is mine," he finally said, "then I have an even greater responsibility." Cedric's expression turned unreadable. "To ensure no one ever learns the truth," he said. Unbeknownst to anyone inside that chamber, a servant had been listening from behind the wall. She slipped away through dim corridors into the abandoned West Tower, retrieved a tiny silver whistle shaped like a raven, and blew a single note into the night. Far above the castle, an actual raven changed direction and flew south, straight toward the sanctuary of the first moon. 3 days later, Liana stood beside the crystal lake at sunrise, feeling something close to peace for the first time in weeks. She smiled at another gentle kick from within her. "You like this place, don't you?" she whispered. Then the surface of the lake rippled. Not from wind, not from the guardian. A single crimson drop spread across the water. Then another. Maeve rushed from the temple, her eyes widening in alarm. "The protection barrier," she said, as cracks of silver light spread across the sky above the sanctuary, the invisible shield guarding the valley beginning to break apart. Somewhere beyond the mountains, someone had discovered their location, and they were coming with an army. The crack appeared without a sound, spreading through the barrier like lightning trapped inside glass, sending silver light racing through the sky above them. The ground trembled beneath their feet. The crystal lake rippled violently, and the guardian lifted its head and released a mournful howl that rolled across the entire valley. Every bird took flight. Every deer fled into the forest. "The sanctuary has never been found," Maeve whispered. "Not in 400 years. "We have to move," she said, seizing Liana's hand. "Move where?" "Somewhere no prophecy can easily be followed. You told me this sanctuary was protected." "It was," Maeve said, looking toward the northern ridge. "Until someone betrayed us." Those words landed harder than the cold air ever had. "Betrayed?" Liana repeated. "No barrier falls on its own," Maeve said grimly. "It must be broken from both outside and within." "There are only a handful of people here," Liana said. "Exactly." Across the valley, hidden among the pines, a hooded figure lowered a polished spyglass and smiled beneath his hood. "So the old witch was telling the truth," he murmured. "The child exists." He removed a small black crystal from his saddlebag and whispered, "Send the signal." The crystal glowed crimson, and far beyond the mountains, hundreds of wolves changed direction at once. Inside the sanctuary, ancient bells rang from the temple tower, deep and urgent, and the courtyard filled with men and women carrying bows and swords older than the kingdoms themselves. Children were hurried into underground tunnels. No one panicked. Everyone moved with the kind of precision that comes only from generations of preparing for a day they had prayed would never arrive. "They've expected this day for generations," Maeve said quietly. An elderly blacksmith approached. "The eastern pass?" "Already sealed." "The river crossing?" "Destroyed before dawn." "The western cliffs?" Maeve hesitated. "They'll be the first place our enemies search." "Then we don't have much time," the blacksmith said darkly. "Tell me the truth," Liana said to Maeve. "Can they protect my child?" Maeve's silence was answer enough. After a long moment, she finally spoke. "They can buy us time, but not forever." Miles away, inside the royal war chamber, King Kaelen stared at maps covered in colored stones marking troop movements across every border. "Our scouts confirmed unusual wolf activity," General Veros said, pointing toward the northern wilderness. "Several rogue packs are traveling toward the same location." "Why?" Kaelen asked. Neither man answered. A young scout burst into the chamber. "We've intercepted coded messages," he said, dropping to one knee. "Every message contains the same phrase: the first heir must not reach adulthood." Silence swallowed the room. General Veros reached for his sword. Cedric's face turned pale, and Kaelen felt something twist painfully inside his chest, though he could not explain why those words felt so personal. Back at the sanctuary, the guardian approached Liana once more, this time lowering itself fully onto the grass. "It has chosen," Maeve said softly. "Chosen what?" "You." "The guardian has never carried a human." The wolf turned its head toward the western mountains, its glowing eyes filled with urgency, and Maeve understood at once. "They're closer than I thought," she said. You must leave now. I'm not leaving everyone else behind, Liana said. If you stay, they'll all die protecting you. Liana looked around at the villagers reinforcing walls, preparing medicines, fletching arrows. Not one of them complaining, not one blaming her. Tears stung her eyes. I can't ask this of them. Maeve placed both hands on her shoulders. You didn't. They chose. Before Liana could answer, a thunderous explosion echoed through the valley. The eastern watchtower disappeared beneath fire and smoke. The ground shook. A child screamed. Another explosion followed, then another. The attack had begun. A young scout sprinted into the courtyard, blood running down his face. They're through the eastern forest, he gasped. I counted nearly 200 before I lost sight of them. Gasps spread through the defenders. 200. Far more than anyone had prepared for. They're not here to capture the child, Maeve said grimly. They're here to erase the prophecy entirely. Liana felt her unborn son kick sharply, stronger than ever before, and suddenly the air around her shimmered, a faint silver glow surrounding her stomach. Every wolf in the courtyard froze. The guardian lowered its head. Even the most seasoned warriors stared in astonishment. A young archer whispered, "The child, he's awake." At that exact moment, a deep, commanding voice echoed across the valley from beyond the burning eastern gate. "Search every building. Leave no survivor. And bring me the woman carrying the royal heir." Liana's heart stopped. Royal heir. The attackers already knew exactly whose child she carried. Someone had not merely betrayed the sanctuary's location. Someone had betrayed her personally. A horn sounded from the western wall, then another, the alarm spreading through the valley as archers climbed ancient watchtowers and healers hurried frightened children into chambers carved beneath the temple. Captain Rowan, commander of the sanctuary's guardians, drew his twin blades, his scarred face calm despite the growing chaos around him. "They've broken through the eastern ridge," he announced. "Estimated numbers?" "Around 200, a scout answered. Then another scout arrived, struggling for breath. "Closer to 300, he corrected. A murmur spread among the defenders. 300 wolves against barely 60 trained protectors. The odds were nearly impossible. "There is one chance," Maeve said to Liana. "Beneath the temple lies an escape passage. If I leave now, they'll follow me," Liana said. "They'll follow you regardless. And everyone here dies buying you time." Liana looked out at the blacksmith tightening his armor, the elderly baker handing bread to frightened children, the young healer preparing herbs instead of weapons. These people barely knew her, and yet they had chosen to stand between her unborn child and an army. "I won't abandon them," she said. "You misunderstand," Maeve said gently. "I'm not asking you to abandon them. I'm asking you to honor their sacrifice." An arrow streaked through the air and struck the stone fountain in the courtyard with a sharp crack. Dozens more followed. Shields, Captain Rowan roared, and wooden barriers slammed together as arrows rained down across the sanctuary. The peaceful valley had become a battlefield in a matter of minutes. The Guardian released a thunderous howl and charged, leaping over the shattered gate and disappearing into the smoke. Seconds later, the valley echoed with terrified screams. Far beyond the fighting, the invading commander watched from horseback, his black steel armor marked with silver and a broken crown engraved across his breastplate. He removed his helmet, revealing gray-streaked hair and deep claw scars across one side of his face. His cold amber eyes surveyed the battlefield without a trace of emotion. "My lord Darius," a younger soldier said, riding beside him. "The Guardian has entered the battle." "I expected as much," Darius said, smiling faintly. "And if it reaches us?" "Then today," Darius said, drawing an enormous sword from its sheath, "another legend dies." Inside the sanctuary, The clash of steel echoed through every corridor as Captain Rowan's defenders fought with disciplined precision despite being badly outnumbered. Each hallway had become a trap. Each doorway, a fortress. "They're incredible," Liana said, watching in stunned silence. "They've spent generations preparing for a war they prayed would never come," Maeve said sadly. A deafening roar shook the valley as the Guardian crashed through the smoke, sending enemy warriors flying like leaves in a storm, its white fur now stained crimson, several deep wounds covering its shoulders. Yet it kept fighting, fearlessly, catching an invading alpha mid-lunge and hurling him into a stone pillar hard enough to shatter the enemy line's confidence. For a moment, hope flickered across the defenders' faces. That hope lasted only seconds. A dozen heavy crossbows appeared along the ridge. Captain Rowan's expression changed instantly. "No," he whispered, as the first volley fired, iron bolts tearing through the air. The Guardian twisted to shield a group of children, and 3 bolts struck its side, a 4th piercing its shoulder. The mighty wolf stumbled, and the entire valley fell silent as it slowly collapsed onto one knee. Liana's heart broke watching it happen. "No," she whispered. The Guardian lifted its head one final time, its glowing eyes finding hers. Then it bowed. Not in defeat, in farewell. "The Guardian has fulfilled its oath," Maeve said, a single tear rolling down her weathered cheek. "The sanctuary now belongs to the next protector." "What does that mean?" Liana asked, but before Maeve could answer, a warm pulse spread through Liana's body. The silver mark hidden beneath her collarbone began to glow. The unborn child kicked with startling strength, and light expanded around her, wrapping mother and child together like liquid moonlight. Every wolf nearby lowered their heads instinctively. "The moon's seal," Captain Rowan said, astonished. An elderly priest whispered, "It has chosen her." Across the battlefield, Lord Darius watched the light with widening eyes. "So it wasn't merely a rumor," he said, smiling coldly, pointing his sword toward the sanctuary. "Take her alive." Then his smile vanished entirely. "The child dies after birth." Liana's blood ran cold. "They're not just hunting an heir," she said to Maeve. "No," Maeve agreed. "They're trying to destroy hope itself." At that moment, a massive explosion shook the temple, ancient stone cracking, dust filling the air. A frightened scout stumbled into the courtyard, his face pale with terror. "They've breached the underground passage," he said. Maeve froze.
Impossible.
Only the Circle of 7 knew that path. Captain Rowan arrived, wiping blood from his brow. "The eastern gate is lost. The enemy is already inside the lower tunnels." They knew exactly where to go. A heavy silence followed. There was no longer any doubt. The sanctuary had not simply been discovered. It had been sold, piece by piece, by someone still standing among them. The temple bells rang again, but this time slow, heavy, mournful. "It is the bell of last light," Maeve said quietly. "It has only been rung when the sanctuary believes it may fall." Around them, mothers embraced their children. Old warriors exchanged quiet nods. Young apprentices carried water to the wounded instead of hiding. No one begged for mercy. No one spoke of surrender. Every person there understood exactly what they were protecting and exactly what it might cost them. Meanwhile, in a quiet corridor far from the fighting, a young healer named Elias lingered behind after the others had gone. Barely 20 winters old, quiet, polite, trusted by everyone in the sanctuary, he waited until the hallway emptied before pulling a small silver coin from his pocket, one side engraved with a broken crown, the other with a serpent wrapped around a crescent moon. His hands trembled. "I had no choice," he whispered. "They promised my sister would live." Tears filled his eyes. "But they lied." "They always do," a voice said from the darkness. Elias spun around to find the enormous white raven that had followed Liana since the forest, perched on a broken pillar, its silver eyes burning with unnatural intelligence. "You aren't a raven," he said, stumbling backward. The creature spread its wings, and moonlight burst through the chamber. Feathers dissolved into silver light, and when the glow faded, a young woman stood where the bird had been, wearing armor forged from shimmering moon steel, a white cloak flowing behind her despite the still air, a narrow silver circlet resting across her forehead. Elias fell to his knees. "The moon sentinels," he whispered. "I thought your order vanished centuries ago." "We vanished," the woman said quietly. "Not disappeared." Deep beneath the sanctuary, Lord Darius walked confidently through the ancient tunnels, never hesitating at any turn, any hidden doorway, any secret passage, because he already knew them all. "How can you be certain the woman remains here?" one of his officers asked. "Because fear is predictable," Darius said, smiling. "When people are protecting someone they love, they always run toward hope, never away from it." He stopped before an enormous stone door covered in faded runes. "This is where they'll make their final stand." "You've been here before," the officer said, puzzled. "I have," Darius said, resting a scarred hand against the ancient stone. "Long ago." Above ground, Liana knelt beside the wounded guardian, its chest rising and falling with painful effort. "You protected strangers," she said, resting her hand upon its blood-soaked fur. "I don't know how to repay that." The guardian slowly opened one glowing eye, but instead of looking at Liana, it looked at her stomach. Soft silver light flowed from its wounds, not outward, but into her. The unborn child kicked so powerfully that Liana gasped as the light surrounded her, every wound from her journey vanishing, exhaustion disappearing entirely, warmth spreading through her body. "It gave him its strength," Maeve whispered, her voice trembling. "The Guardian has chosen its successor." At that exact moment, far away in Dunholm Castle, King Kaelen dropped the goblet in his hand, wine splashing across the stone floor. His heartbeat accelerated. His wolf surged violently inside him, and a single image flashed across his mind. Silver light, a wounded white wolf, Liana crying, and then, unmistakably, a child's laughter. Not imagined. He could hear it clearly, as if it belonged to a moment happening right beside him rather than somewhere beyond the mountains. "What is happening to me?" he said, staggering against his throne. "Your Majesty?" Cedric said, stepping forward. "I can feel my blood calling to me," Kaelen said, staring toward the northern horizon. Cedric's face turned pale, because he had feared this exact moment for years. If the Alpha King formed a true blood bond with his unborn heir, nothing, not distance, not magic, not carefully constructed lies, would be able to keep them apart any longer. Back inside the sanctuary, the mysterious moon sentinel walked calmly into the Hall of Records. Every defender stared as Captain Rowan lowered his sword. "Lady Selene," he said, "you live." "For today," she answered. "I prayed the moon goddess had not abandoned us," Maeve said, smiling through tears. "The moon never abandons those who keep their promises," Selene said, her expression darkening. "But she does judge those who break them." Her silver eyes swept across the room, passing over Liana, passing over Maeve, and stopping instead on Captain Rowan. Silence filled the hall. "Why are you looking at me?" Rowan asked, confused. "Because the traitor," Selene said quietly, "was never the healer." Every face turned toward the captain. Rowan slowly lowered his swords, and something in his expression shifted, the warmth vanishing from his eyes entirely. When he finally smiled, it was the smile of a stranger. "You always were perceptive, Sentinel," he said. Liana felt her heart stop. The man who had defended the sanctuary. The man everyone had trusted without question. The man who had stood beside Maeve for 20 years, had trained its warriors, had buried its dead, had betrayed them from the very beginning. "I protected this sanctuary," Rowan said calmly, letting his swords clatter onto the stone floor. I trained its warriors. I buried its dead. And I learned every secret hidden within these walls. Why betray the people who trusted you? Liana asked. Because trust doesn't end wars, Rowan said. Power does. You sold innocent lives, Celine said, stepping between him and Liana. I bought a future, Rowan replied. You bought your own ambition. You still believe the prophecies speaks of peace, Rowan said, laughing softly. It does.
No.
It speaks of power. Whoever controls the first heir controls every alpha on the continent. His eyes settled on Liana. Your son was never meant to be free. A deafening crash interrupted him as the temple doors burst inward. Lord Darius entered with a handful of elite warriors, his black armor scorched from battle, his confidence entirely untouched. He looked first at Rowan, then at Liana. So, he said, our long journey finally ends. He slowly removed his gauntlets. I've spent 30 years searching for the first heir, he said, turning to Maeve. You hid him well. No, Maeve answered, smiling faintly despite everything. The moon hid him. Darius's expression hardened. Kill everyone except the woman, he ordered, and his soldiers advanced. Steel rang against steel as Captain Rowan drew a hidden dagger, aiming to strike Liana before Celine intercepted him, moonsteel meeting black iron in a shower of silver sparks. Their duel echoed through the temple, revealing that Rowan possessed skills no one had ever suspected, because he had once been a moon sentinel himself, before abandoning his sacred oath entirely. Maeve hurried Liana toward an altar at the rear of the chamber. Stand here, she said, and Liana obeyed, feeling the circular stone platform glow faintly beneath her feet. What is this? She asked. The Heartstone, Maeve answered. It judges rulers. I am no queen, Liana said. Exactly, Maeve said, smiling. Across the room, Darius broke through the defenders and climbed the altar steps, his sword pointed directly at Liana. You've caused enough suffering, he said. It ends today. He raised the blade. Before it could fall, the Heartstone awakened. A pillar of silver light erupted toward the ceiling. Every warrior froze in place. Ancient carvings along the walls began to glow, and voices filled the temple. Not frightening voices, but gentle ones, the voices of generations who had guarded hope long before any of them had been born. Liana felt warmth spread through her entire body, and then heard a tiny heartbeat. Not one.
2.
Her eyes widened. The prophecy was never only about your son, Maeve said, smiling through tears. The moon goddess never chose a single life. She placed a gentle hand over Liana's stomach. She chose a family. Another tiny heartbeat answered the first.
Twins.
The revelation stunned the entire room. Darius stepped back in disbelief. Rowan lowered his weapon. Even Celine stared in silence. The first heir was never one child, Maeve said, laughing softly. It is a brother and sister. The future will need both strength and wisdom. At that very moment, hundreds of miles away, King Kaelen fell to one knee as a wave of energy swept through him, and for the first time since the broken bond, his wolf lifted its head, not in grief this time, but in recognition. He saw two tiny lights inside his mind, one burning bright like the morning sun, the other glowing softly like the rising moon. I'm a father, he whispered. Without another word, he stood, and to the astonishment of his entire court, removed the royal crown from his head and placed it upon the empty throne. Your Majesty? Cedric said, staring. No, Kaelen said, his voice steady for the first time in longer than he could remember. Today, I become simply a man trying to save his family. He mounted his horse before anyone could stop him, riding north for the first time in his reign not as a king seeking victory, but as a father seeking redemption. Back inside the sanctuary, Darius realized the battle had already been lost because the Heartstone judged intentions, not titles. Every soldier fighting for greed found their weapons growing unbearably heavy in their hands, while every defender fighting for love found renewed strength flowing through their limbs. One by one, Darius's warriors laid down their swords. Captain Rowan dropped to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "I wanted to protect my own family," he said. "And in trying to save them," Maeve said gently, kneeling beside him, "you forgot every other family mattered too." "I have no excuse," Rowan said, lowering his head.
No, mae replied.
"But you still have a choice." He surrendered without resistance. Lord Darius attempted to flee toward the temple doors, but before he reached them, the wounded guardian gathered the last of its strength and stepped into his path. The great white wolf looked into Darius's eyes, and the warlord slowly released his sword, feeling shame for the first time in decades. The guardian gave one final, peaceful howl, and then, like snow beneath the spring sun, its body dissolved into thousands of silver lights that drifted upward into the night sky. No cheers followed, only respectful silence. A legend had completed its purpose. Weeks later, the kingdom began to change. The hidden sanctuary opened its gates, and old enemies met around the same table instead of standing on opposite sides of a battlefield. King Kaelen arrived without an army, without armor, without even his crown. When he finally stood before Liana, neither of them spoke for several long moments. "I cannot undo what I did," he said quietly. "No," Liana agreed. "You can't." "I don't ask for forgiveness," he said. "I know. I ask only for the chance to spend the rest of my life earning the trust of the children I never knew existed." Liana looked out toward the valley, where wolves from once rival packs now worked side by side, rebuilding homes that years of hatred had destroyed. She smiled faintly. "Our children deserve a world better than the one we inherited." "Then let us build it," Kaelen said. She extended her hand, not as a mate, not yet, but as a partner in creating peace. He accepted it with humility, and above them, two white ravens circled beneath a full moon before disappearing into the stars. The prophecy had not ended with the birth of the first heirs. It had only just begun, with a generation that would be remembered not for the wars they fought, but for the peace they eventually chose to build together. Years later, when young wolves asked how the Age of Peace began, the elders did not speak first of kings or battles. They spoke of a mother who refused to surrender hope even when she had every reason to. A father who learned that true strength begins with admitting when you are wrong. A sanctuary that chose courage over fear when fear would have been so much easier. And two children who reminded an entire world that leadership is never inherited by blood alone. It is earned slowly and honestly, through compassion, through justice, and through the willingness to protect even those who could never repay you. Because the strongest alpha, in the end, is never the one who rules through fear. It is the one who inspires others to choose kindness, even after they have suffered the greatest pain imaginable. If you were Liana, would you have given Kaelen a second chance after everything that happened? Or do you believe some betrayals should never be forgiven? Let us know in the comments below. We read every single one, and your perspective might just inspire our next story. And if this story touched your heart tonight, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another unforgettable werewolf romance filled with mystery, redemption, and the kind of powerful life lessons that stay with you long after the screen goes dark.